I had the honor to work with some of them. They deserve this award and many other awards, more than me. Dr. Mahmoud al-Hariri, Dr. Abdul Aziz, an Aleppo surgeon who I witnessed after his hospital Al-Zarzour was bombed, and he was trying to salvage some of the medical supplies so he can use it for the next patient.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is on over 30 cable stations from Maine to New York City and points west. We begin with the stirring conclusion of the Gandhi Peace Award address by honoree Dr. Zaher Sahloul. Then some reflections on the evil that the U.S. and Israel are supporting in the occupation of the Western Sahara. Following that, coverage of a protest at the Iron Gate of the Connecticut governor's mansion, a protest calling for action to prevent mass evictions. And then some militant but totally non-violent protest in Minnesota. You recall that last week, Gandhi Peace Award honoree Dr. Sahloul was talking about going to Syria with a Chicago pediatrician colleague, and afterwards how they founded Med Global to help victims like Syrians, Palestinians in Gaza, and Rohingya in camps, and others.
To reduce healthcare disparity in Chicago and other places in the United States, and to help frontline healthcare workers during their ordeal fighting COVID. I invite you to check out and support Med Global. We can build peace through health and health through peace. Disparity is more dangerous than wars and pandemics. According to Physicians for Human Rights, more than 550 hospitals were bombed in Syria. And more than 923 doctors, nurses, and medics were killed by mostly the Assad regime and its allies, Russia and Iran. Every nurse and doctor who was killed in Syria has a story, had a dream, and a family like you. I had the honor to work with some of them. They deserve this award and many other awards, more than me. Dr. Mahmoud al-Hariri, Dr. Abdul Aziz, an Aleppo surgeon who I witnessed after his hospital Al-Zarzour was bombed, and he was trying to salvage some of the medical supplies so he can use it for the next patient. Dr. Hussam al-Nahas, a medical student who organized an amazing infrastructure to help the victims of chemical weapons. He read about it in Google and implemented in many cities in Syria. Dr. Mahmoud from Al-Ghouta in a city called Ain Tarma, who was in the middle of the night in August 21st, 2013, when his hospital was flooded with 700 people choking to death after they were exposed to sarin gas. He had to choose which patient he had to save and which patient he will let die because he did not have enough ventilators for all of them. 144 patients at that night died in his hospital. Most of them are children. Dr. Tenari in the city of Sarmin, who also survived a chemical weapon attack with chlorine gas. Dr. Ikhtiyar, an orthopedic surgeon from Latakia, who left his lucrative practice to build a field hospital in the mountain to save the injured in his hometown. Dr. Rami, who left his lucrative practice in the United Kingdom in Leicester to be the doctor in the front line in the mountain of Latakia. Dr. Abu Muhammadin, urologist, who worked in underground hospital in the city of Aleppo because it was bombed 17 times until it was rebuilt underground for protection. The nurse Abu Rajab, who was injured himself multiple times while trying to treat the victims of barrel bombing in his neighborhood As-Sahur. Nurse Bara'a, who I met in Aleppo And when I was testifying in the United Nations Security Council about the siege of Aleppo, I asked her, what would you like me to share with the members of the United Nations Security Council? She said, there is a patient in my hospital. She's a child. Her name is Sarab. She's injured in her brain because of barrel bomb. Can you ask the members of the United Nations Security Council to evacuate her to Turkey? Maybe she can be saved. The United Nations Security Council members were not able to evacuate Sarab to Turkey. She died. Dr. Farida, the only OB-GYN specialist in the city of Aleppo, and Dr. Lubna As-Saad, pediatrician in the province of Idlib, who was traumatized after she was displaced herself with her family from her city, Ma'arat al-Nu'man, in the recent bombing campaign by the Assad regime. Dr. Noor Akhras, Dr. Basil Atasi, Dr. Abdul Ghani Sankari, who joined me in the first medical mission of the Syrian American Medical Society to help Syrian refugees in Antioch, Turkey. And the hundreds of volunteers and staff members of the Syrian American Medical Society, the Union of Medical Care and Relief Organizations, USAM, and the Syrian Expatriate Medical Association, SEMA, and the American Relief Coalition for Syria. I dedicate Gandhi Award to the people who deserve it, the medical professionals who have been killed in Syria while treating patients and serving their communities under the principle of medical neutrality. Let me tell you some of their stories. Dr. Hassan Al-A'raj was a compassionate and exemplary cardiologist who dedicated his life to serving his community. Before the start of the conflict, Dr. Hassan worked as a cardiologist in Hama province, where he ran the Kafr Zita Specialty Hospital. When protests began in Syria in 2011, Dr. Hassan treated protesters and other injured during violent crackdown. After his hospital was bombed multiple times, he realized that his colleagues and patients needed a creative way to protect them. He led the effort to build the Central Cave Hospital of Syria, a hospital dug in the mountain, to provide free treatment to the community while protecting those inside the hospital from attacks. I visited him in the hospital in 2016. He told me that he would like to convert it to a museum after the crisis to show the world the extreme that Syrian doctors went through to provide healthcare to their communities. Dr. Hassan did not live to see his dream. On April 13, 2016, as he was leaving his hospital, his ambulance was targeted with a heat-seeking missile from a Russian airplane. He was killed by this targeted attack. Dr. Hassan will be always remembered. He was a friend and inspiration to all of those who knew him. Dr. Wasim al-Mu'az. Dr. Muhammad Wasim Mu'az was one of the best pediatricians in Aleppo. In 2016, he was one of the last remaining pediatricians in the east side of the city under siege. He stayed in Aleppo even while the deadly violence escalated and siege tightened to continue to serve his patients. Dr. Wasim worked at the Children's Hospital during the day, and at night he attended to emergencies at Al-Quds Hospital. As a pediatrician, he saved the lives of countless children throughout the conflict. On April 27, 2016, an airstrike on Al-Quds Hospital decimated the facility and killed Dr. Wasim, also killed a dentist, 3 nurses, and 22 civilians inside the hospital. We will always remember Dr. Mu'az as the kindest and bravest of souls whose devotion to treating the youngest victims of war was unparalleled. And finally, Dr. Muhammad Majid Bari. He was a physician with a humanitarian organization called Saving Lives. He had graduated with honors from Aleppo University Medical School. Dr. Majid's colleagues and friends remember him as a kind, compassionate, and talented physician. On October 15, 2014, Dr. Majid was transporting patients in an ambulance in Aleppo when a heat-seeking missile targeted and struck his vehicle. He was killed along with 3 other civilians. After his death, I'm not a poet, but I wrote these spoken words in his memory. And Amina Masri, a Syrian American educator from Massachusetts, will read these spoken words.
Thank you, Dr. Zaher. Many of my colleagues left Aleppo because they were afraid about losing their lives. Some of my friends were detained, tortured, and killed just because they insisted on working as doctors. They swore to save lives. They were treated like criminals or even worse. They were told the whole world we were told the whole world respects our neutrality. We were told the Geneva Convention guarantees our impartiality. We were told that being a doctor is like being an angel. You give from yourself to heal your patient. The regime did not respect any of that. The world did not rush to help us. We suffered in silence like my homeland. Some of my friends died drowning, trying to flee on a boat to a new land of hope. They were swallowed by unsympathetic waves of the Mediterranean Sea. I stayed. I stayed because it is my duty to save lives. I stayed because if I left, who else will stay? Who else will offer a hand of a healing to a sobbing child pulled out of the rubble of her home destroyed by a barrel bomb? Who else will vaccinate the children in my neighborhood so they don't have polio or measles? Everyone left us to face our fate. We have no one but God. He is watching those who deserted us. I guess he's testing them and testing us. I don't expect anyone to react to my death. I don't expect anyone to stop the killing in my hometown. I lost my faith in humanity, but I lived a fulfilling life and I don't regret a minute I had serving my patients. I will join another 560 Syrian doctors who were killed by the war criminals. My patients will miss me, and so my wife and 2 young children. I will miss what's left of my Syrian homeland. I will miss the courage of my colleagues who are still working, saving lives as usual. I will miss their faith, their warmth, and their humor. And I will miss the sounds of the barrel bombs. It is too silent here. It is too cold. It is too dark. It is too un-Syrian. Pray for me and for my homeland. Rest in peace, Dr. Majid.
So I thank God for his immense blessings. I thank my parents, humble elementary school teachers in the windy city of Syria, Homs, who taught me the most simple and timeless values of hard work, aiming high, and believing in my dreams. I thank my wife, Suzanne, for being both the parents and the friend to our children when I was absent physically or mentally, for standing with me throughout my turbulent journey, and for her sacrifices, endurance, and wisdom. I thank my children, Adham, Mahdi, and Marwa, for volunteering in medical missions and to help their communities, for succeeding in school when I am in harm's way, for growing up to be successful, caring, and civically engaged, and for being proud Syrian and Muslim Americans. I thank our partners in this long journey, the foundations, the faith and civic leaders in Syria Faith Initiative, my mosques in Chicago, in Bridgeview, and Burridge, the many churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples that paid attention to Syrian refugees and children. They held prayers and raised funds, especially the Church of Latter-day Saints and many others. Thank you, Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth, for your support. Thank you for every member in our government and UN agencies and many other governments who cried for the Syrian children and refugees and made sure that they did the right thing in spite of the mounting obstacles. I thank my friend, my associates in clinical practice, my board of directors, our selfless volunteers, my extended family on social media, and everyone who donated to help someone whom she never met. I won't be able to remember all of you, but each one of you has a special place in my heart and in the hearts of the Syrian people. I was in Idlib province in northwest Syria in January of this year, right before the COVID pandemic hit us, in a medical mission organized by a collaboration between local Syrian NGO called Violate, our organization, and my organization, Mid Global. There are 4.5 million Syrian refugees in Idlib. Half of them are displaced from other regions. 1.2 million of them live in camps, in tents, 1,250 camps. At that time, there was a barbaric campaign waged by the Syrian regime and the Russian Air Force. More than 65 hospitals in the province of Idlib were bombed. 1.4 million civilians were displaced to a small strip of land near the Turkish border. They had nowhere to go. In one of the camps, I met with a group of children. Two of them were best friends, Asma and Huda. They were 9 years old. Both of them were displaced with their families from a small village north of Hama 7 times before they ended up in this muddy small camp near the city of Idlib. They walk every day for 2 hours in the mud and rain to reach a nearby school. We had a campfire in the cold, rainy night. About 50 beautiful children gathered around, and I asked them, who wants to be a doctor in the future? Almost all of them raised their small hands. Several wanted also to be engineers to build their destroyed homes, and even one of them wanted to be a president. They were singing, smiling, and dreaming in spite of the cold, the displacement, and our apathy. These beautiful and innocent children deserve our attention, my friends. Asma and Huda deserve our attention. Dear brothers and sisters, let us use this momentum generated by this award and the promising changing in our nation as a drive towards fulfilling the aspiration of the Syrian people, restoring peace and national reconciliation, the return of refugees, and rebuilding what has been destroyed in the cradle of civilization. And let me end with this quote from Mahatma Gandhi. They ignore you, they laugh at you, they fight you, then you win. Thank you very much. Jazakumullah khairan.
Fine remarks and honor well deserved. Speaking of Syria, Hamid Kutini posted on Facebook photos from Idlib, where tens of thousands are living in tents and where heavy rains cause even more ruin. These photos are of a girl picking up stones with her bare hands to try to make a pathway over the puddles and rivulets of water. Notice the sandals that are her footwear. You may recall last week that we talked about the deal that the U.S. made to recognize Morocco's occupation of the Western Sahara in return for the kingdom's opening relations with Israel. The Western Sahara is a bit larger than the size of Great Britain. On Christmas Eve, Democracy Now! Rebroadcast its hour-long show on Amy Goodman's brave trip to Western Sahara.
Western Sahara, where peaceful protesters led by women are beaten in the streets. Thousands have been tortured, imprisoned, killed, and disappeared while resisting the Moroccan occupation.
He jabbed right at my eye with his baton. I was yelling at him, "Hey, you Moroccan, you pulled out my eye."
Where natural resources are plundered from phosphates to fish.
I say that our damnation comes from the natural resources we have here. If it wasn't for these natural resources, Morocco would never have invaded Western Sahara.
Where a massive wall divides a people, the Sahrawi, the native population, denied a vote for self-determination.
I urge you to go to democracynow.org and see the whole program, but I must show you this segment.
While the U.S. has never recognized Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara, Washington has played a pivotal role in shoring up Morocco's occupation. In addition to Secretary of State Henry Kissinger hoping for a rigged vote at the United Nations Security Council regarding Western Sahara, President Jimmy Carter's State Department in 1979 gave $200 million to the U.S. company Northrop Page Communications to build an intrusion detection system for the nearly 1,700-mile wall Morocco built in Western Sahara, which is lined with an estimated 7 million landmines. A year later, Carter provided Morocco with $230 million in military aid. It's been a bipartisan affair ever since. King Hassan II with President Reagan in 1982.
Moroccan people and American people will be ready always to mix their blood for the dignity of man.
His Majesty briefed me on the latest developments in his efforts to reach a peaceful settlement of the conflict in the Western Sahara, and I expressed my admiration for his support.
After the Cold War ended, Morocco became a key U.S. ally in the so-called War on Terror. In 2004, President George W. Bush designated Morocco to be a major non-NATO ally of the United States, opening the door for more military deals. And the money has flowed both ways. The state-owned Moroccan Phosphate Company, OCP, which operates in Western Sahara, donated as much as $12 million to the Clinton Foundation prior to the 2016 election.
Yes, the Democrats as well as the Republicans support the cruel occupation of Western Sahara. In Hartford, people led by Unidad Latinas en Acción used a caravan to Governor Lamont's mansion to insist on action to help people facing homelessness due to inability to pay rent. Remember, the government measures up until now just postpone rent, so some families are owing many months of rent and can't possibly pay it. The slogan of the rally was, "Cancel rent."
Good afternoon. My name is Megan, and I just came here on a caravan from New Haven. Mi nombre es Megan y acabo de llegar con la caravana de autos que vienen desde la ciudad de New Haven. También hubo una pequeña caravana que vino desde New London y Norwich. There was also a small caravan that came from New London and Norwich. Come on, we can do better than that. You want to help me, CJ?
I just think he's rude. We're out here and he didn't come and offer us anything to drink.
All right, so we're here at the governor's house. Estamos aquí en la casa del gobernador porque hay mucha gente que no tiene casa. Because we're here in the governor's house because there are a lot of people who don't have houses right now. And that's not right. No. And there are people who are about to lose their houses. That's right. Because we need rental relief, we need to stop evictions, we need housing to be a human right. That's right. Estamos aquí porque tenemos que cancelar la renta. Porque porque necesitamos más ayuda para pagar la renta y porque tenemos que acabar con los desalojos. Necesitamos que el gobernador extienda la moratoria de desalojos. ¿Qué dicen, mi gente? ¿Qué dice?
¡Justicia ahora! ¡Justicia ahora!
¿Qué queremos?
¡Justicia!
¿Cuándo?
¡Ahora!
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 Cancela
la renta.
Cancela
la renta.
Cancela
la renta.
Cancela la renta.
You'll notice the call for legal representation in eviction proceedings. Often people have no knowledge of their rights. Lawyers, paid for by the government, would be of great help. The DSA of Central Connecticut just passed a resolution calling for such a measure to be passed in the next legislative session. We'll have more about this in a future program. And on December 6th, in Minnesota, counter-protesters attended a rally by right-wing fascists who were denouncing the Minnesota governor because he had the gall to tell people to wear masks. The anti-fascists came with homemade shields, a brilliant tactic because they're purely defensive equipment. Also noticed in the video the banner calling for the fascists to follow their leader.
We took a trip on the Real Creek tip, that's hole number 1.
The shielded anti-fascists were not attacked that day. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.